Science and Technology, and MoS PMO, Atomic Energy and Space, after he personally witnessed ISRO make history by successfully launching India's maiden private Vikram, the suborbital rocket from Sriharikota last November. Dr. Jitendra Singh is taking charge of India's space race and converting to reality transformative deep tech ventures, including India's first manned mission to space. May I now invite the Honorable Union Minister of Science and Technology, MoS PMO, Atomic Energy and Space, Dr. Jitendra Singh, for a keynote address on conquering space.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here this morning. I think picking up from where Nidhi was talking about, I think the best way to appreciate what has happened in the last 9 years under the Modi rule is to just recall and look back what it was like before 2014. And overall, if you see, you would recall it was an atmosphere of desperation, youth disillusioned, shy of asserting their identity when they went abroad, a sense of cynicism prevailing among the citizens. And suddenly when the Prime Minister took over on the 26th of May, there was virtually sunshine at twilight. So many television sets lit up. I think the most watched swearing-in ceremony happened, and I wrote a small piece that this is the beginning of a journey from pessimism to optimism. And as Piyush was saying just before me, the esteem has gone up. I think the esteem of an average Indian to look at himself, to be not shy of being Indian, not being reluctant to say when you are asked for your introduction, when you go abroad, where are you from? Many of these youngsters said, I'm from Asia. They would conveniently camouflage. So I think that's the biggest, because being a student of science, we have learned to talk with facts, figures, and evidence. Now, because there's so much to talk about, we can talk the whole day, but picking up from where she was saying, she was particularly referring to space again and again. I think there was never a dearth of talent in this country, or even potentials, whether it be scientific, whether it be innovative, whether it be otherwise. But what was lacking possibly was the right kind of milieu which could provide an exposure to the talent, or which could discover the hidden aptitudes inside us. Now, even if you talk about space, because I'm just picking up from where she said, because that's just now being talked about, many of you would have seen the pictures of Vikram Sarabhai carrying a satellite launcher on the carrier of his bicycle. So you can imagine the kind of aspiration this young scientist had, the dreams in his eyes. I mean, we were so primitive at that time. I mean, that was the time when America was virtually preparing to land a human being on the surface of the moon. And here we had a scientist. But I think what was lacking was the right kind of patronage or prioritization at the level of the policymakers, at the level of the political dispensation. And sometimes I wonder, I tend to think if Sarabhai had lived today in the Modi era, we would have actually become a space power 3 decades earlier. And and as I said, let's talk with evidence and statistics. If you just draw the comparison of the fact that Neil Armstrong was the first human being to land on the surface of the moon, which happened in the year 1969. We were just singing nursery rhymes, Chanda Mama Dur Ke. I mean, that was our kind of preparedness at that time. And he had a stroll around, which was captured by BBC. And he made that famous statement, which has gone down the history. He said, one small step for man, a giant step for mankind. So the other day, I was telling some of the friends from America, I said Neil Armstrong went around, had a stroll, but he could not see the presence of water on the surface of the moon. It was our mission, Chandrayaan, which went there and picked up pictures of water being on the surface of the moon, which has a huge scientific ramification, because H2O, water, might be an indirect indication of human habitat being possible on the surface of the moon. So I'm trying to assert what I said a few moments back. We had the potential, the talent, possibly the kind of patronage that we required from the leadership was lacking, and that is where Prime Minister Modi happened. Fortunately, I have had the opportunity to deal with the departments, with the ministries, with the domains which have been very close to Prime Minister Modi's heart. For example, governance, which is, of course, falls in the purview of personnel, DOPT, administrative reforms, and we, of course, science, technology, all the other departments. And I think when the historians record this period, one of the hallmarks was that Modi gave a model of governance which is sustainable. Nowadays that we talk in terms, it's fashionable talking in terms of sustainable goals, right from UN down to bottom. So this is a sustainable governance model. B, which also defies the principle of diminishing returns, whichever may be the model, however popular, however acceptable, with the passage of time it tends to lose the sheen. But here it is the other way around. And see that it grows stronger with every challenge. You saw that happening after the earthquake when he was Chief Minister. You saw that happening in the aftermath of COVID when he was Prime Minister. And that is possible because he's always experimenting with ideas, developing ideas, evolving them, trying to carry them to the next level. With the result that when you go to brief him on a subject, I'm sure you will come back picking up 2-3 extra cues because he would have already walked extra mile. Secondly, he has the capacity to make a departure from the established norms. Normally, those in government find it convenient to remain status quoist because we tend to look at the next election, which of course is something, to that extent, I think he's also introduced a new kind of a political culture in this country, which is based on the objectivity and the scientific indices, instead of simply looking at the vote bank. One of the most glittering examples is, I don't know how many of you under this roof know that the first ever citrus fruit park in India with Israeli collaboration was brought up in Mizoram, because when I spoke to the ambassador of Israel, he said that is the most appropriate place. Now, if you go by the political prudence, that should be last preference. A state with less than 1 million population, just one MP can neither make nor mar a government in the center, and that too from a different party. But we went ahead because we go by the objectivity as was being said. And see, he has the capacity to break the taboos of the past. I'll just give you an example each. When I say he has the capacity to innovate, and incidentally, while he was bringing technology into governance, he was also introducing good governance in the science departments to streamline them. So he was creating a blend which many of us didn't realize. Now, as far as governance is concerned, if you recall, soon after this government came in, within a few months, this is of course also the department I have been associated with, an order comes out doing away with the age-old practice, which was a dubious legacy of the British Empire, to get your certificates, documents attested by a gazetted officer. And self-attestation was allowed in the government sector. But I don't know how many of us realize that Prime Minister Modi was sending out a huge message across the country. And look here, now this is a government headed by me, and I and my government has the capacity to trust my countrymen, more so my youth. And in a nation where you have more than 70% of population below the age of 40, if you're not ready to trust the youth, how are you going to do business with them? Then within a few months, he speaks from the Red Fort. He makes a call for abolition of the interviews to government appointments. So there's no room left for any kind of nepotism or discrimination, and provides a level playing field. And just a few days back, that's also one of these departments I'm dealing with. We had this written test only in 2 languages, English and Hindi, and the staff certification. Now we have in 15 languages right from this month, May, incidentally. I think that makes a small news. Not a very spicy one, but does make an information, because the first ever exam, written exam under the Staff Selection Commission, will be held in the month of May with 15 languages, of which 13 would be regional languages. And that is something which has been welcomed even by the opposition-ruled South Indian states. Recently, we received a message from the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, etc. So, we would reach where we are required. We would reach the last mile, and then leave it to the prudence of the people. And that has been the motive. And as was being said, right in the beginning, he said, we cannot let one region grow and leave aside the other, because the exact word he said that भारत माता का समूचा विकास तभी संभव है जब दोनों बुझाएं एक समान बलवान हो. And that he was referring to Northeast, he was referring to Jammu and Kashmir. And Northeast and Jammu and Kashmir are today being cited as the development models of the Modi era. Those who have gone before, I mean, I think the media persons know that better, because if ever Northeast was in news, it was news for wrong reasons, for road blockades, for violent incidents, for encounters. Now it's the other way around. You report the tallest bridge, the longest bridge being constructed in Northeast, etc., etc. You didn't. There were at least 2 or 3 states which had never seen a train. Now you have this Itanagar, from Itanagar you have this Arunachal Express coming over to Delhi. So you have airport virtually in every. So there has been a tremendous amount of focus, tremendous amount of hard work which has gone into it to make sure that there is an equitable development of every region, regardless of any other consideration. And that is, I think, is what is making Modi model acceptable across North, West, East, South, even Northeast. You've seen so many prime ministers, they might be having a huge popularity rating, maybe in central India, not so much in South. Some maybe in pockets of South, not here. But here, you go to any region of the country. And that's because it's been based objectively. The aspirational district, I think some of these new initiatives would be case studies for the future researchers. Earlier on, what happened? We would arbitrarily choose some districts and call them backward districts. And then expect that the priority would be given to those districts. It's no longer so. We have some scientific indices, about 40, 41 indices, and on the basis that a district may be high in one index, may be low in that, how to bring it at par with the highest rating of the district in the state, and then vis-a-vis the national level. So it's total objectivity, real-time based. Since I was involved in that exercise, when the list of aspiration districts came out in the newspapers next morning, I started receiving calls from my own constituency. कि साहब क्या फायदा हुआ? दिल्ली बैठे हुए अपने क्षेत्र का एक जिला भी नहीं डलवा सके. So I was at pains to explain to them, look here, this is a different time now. It's not that कि पहले कोई रेल का मंत्री बन जाता था तो अपने गांव में रेल का स्टेशन खोलना भले ही कोई पैसेंजर हो के ना हो. You've seen those times. And why I'm recalling this, we have to recall because over the 10 years, over the 9 years gone by, we sometimes tend to forget, and then there's a new generation also coming up. The fast-track development which has been made possible in this country over the last 9 years is because we did not waste our time and focus in calculating kisko dena, kisko nahi dena. And the figures speak for themselves because now we live in an evidence-based era. I'll just give you 1 or 2 examples. I was talking about youth just now, the Commerce Minister. We had just about 145 medical colleges in this country in 2014 when this government came. We have added 260. So in the last 9 years, we have added more number of medical colleges than they existed in the last 70 years. We had about 725 universities in 2014. We have added 300 more in 9, almost 50%. You had, and if you go by the rating, it is almost 1 university every week and 1 medical college every day. As far as the airports are concerned, you just had about 74 airports in 2014. Today, the number is 147. So you have created more than double in 9 years. And that's because हमने ये नहीं सोचा कि ईटानगर में नहीं बनाना, कि वहाँ से वोट नहीं मिलेगा, कि फलां जगह सिक्किम में नहीं मिलाना कि वो एक आता है. It's been, since we focused on making ourselves available, our services available where it was required. The PMGSY road, very, very ambitious project for the rural roads. Till 2014, we had constructed only 3.8 lakh kilometers of these rural roads. The number today is 7 lakh kilometers. So almost double. So what was constructed in all those bygone years has been constructed very recently in the last 9 years. So to that extent, I think Prime Minister Modi has not only departed from the past practice, he's also given us a new kind of a political culture, new kind of work culture in this country. And even these governance reforms which we talk about and which has become quite widely discussed subject today are not per se only governance reforms, they have a huge socio-economic impact as well. I don't know how many in this room know, because I'm dealing with multiple departments. In the Department of Pensions, we have had a rule that a divorced daughter or a separated daughter would not be entitled to her family pension or her father's pension. We've done away with that rule, because I said if you wait for, unless she got a judgment from the court. I said we have seen the VVIPs waiting for 2 decades, 3 decades, not getting a judgment from the court. So we did away with that, and we said, okay, let her just file a petition, and that would be enough evidence. Similarly, if a working employee dies without having put in 10 years of service, his family would not be entitled to pension. Then I said, did you ask him before he was dying that this is the rule, so hold on. If you didn't, then what right do you have? We did away with that. The question came, if he comes alive, what would happen? I mean, if he goes, and that also applied to those who got missing. And that, I think, somebody like Arnav would appreciate. In Northeast, we had such huge problem. Kidnappings happening, people dying in encounters, bodies not getting recovered, and not getting family pension, unless 2 conditions, either the dead body is discovered or 7 years have elapsed. And that is the time when the family is in the greatest need. So this government till day has done away with over 2,000 rules, which had become obsolete with the passage of time. And I sometimes wonder why it was not done all these years by the earlier governments. There were rules which might have been relevant at that time, which also suited the colonial rulers. Like, for example, there was a rule, if the office toilet is not cleaned in the morning, you can send the attendant to the prison. Now, this smacked of huge feudal mindset. And at the same time, maybe 200 years ago or 150 years ago, when you didn't have these sanitary facilities, it might have had some relevance. What was the justification of carrying on like this for so many years? Now, coming to space, as was being mentioned, and I also refer to Sarabhai, and I said, Prime Minister Modi, one of his advantages is that he has the courage of conviction to break the taboos of the past, and I think space is one of the glaring examples. Nobody could have imagined that one day space sector would be open to private players. The Department of Space, the ISRO, was working behind a wheel of secrecy. There was not even a demand. We had reconciled that it would always eternally work behind a wheel of secrecy. Suddenly it was made open to the private participation. Within just about 3 years, we have more than 100 startups in space sector alone. You saw the Skyroot startup group sending up its private rockets. And in the last 2-3 years, space has become a huge means of generating economy. Because we can go on and on, but before I conclude, I think the other hallmark, which is not often discussed of these last 9 years, is that Prime Minister Modi awakened the nation to avenues which were not earlier spoken about. Like, for example, the startups. You just had about 350 startups in 2014. You have today more than 90,000, more than 100 unicorns. The other aspect is bioeconomy. Even in startup, our minds got stuck in IT without realizing that India's exclusive domain is biodiversity, our huge ocean line. Our bioeconomy in 2014 was just about $10 billion. It's now increased to $8 billion within 9 years. In 2025, we target about 100 billion and about 300 billion by 2030. All these Himalayas, the aroma mission, the purple revolution has begun in the last 3-4 years. It's become an alternative means of agri-tech startups. Those who got into it are making lakhs out of lavender cultivation. And these newer avenues, which are actually our assets, which had remained unexplored, the virgin sectors, ocean. We have 7,500 long kilometer coastal line, more than any other country in the world. Only country which has an ocean named itself. Australia is a country, Australia is a continent, Australia is an island, but the ocean is not known as the Australian Ocean. Why? Because my forefathers could foresee the huge wealth lying inside. And just as she was referring to Gaganyaan, a man going up into the space, simultaneously we'll be sending an Indian down into the ocean. 5,000 is the sea depth. And it was Prime Minister who made the sea realize by announcing from the ramparts of Red Fort not once but twice about the deep sea mission. and we've already set in some of so the unexplored areas and the other avenues which had remained lesser prioritized. I think the signals have come, and I think Jyoti is also there. So I would just conclude, and of course, she hinted that you also have to refer to Jammu Kashmir before you leave the stage. I think that speaks for itself. A huge anomaly of history, a miscarriage of history, which had to wait for somebody like Modi to come and get it corrected. The abrogation of Article 370 and 35A. I think the only example which I would cite before concluding is that the earlier governments did not offer or did not allow citizenship to a huge chunk of population which had come from Pakistan, which had migrated from Pakistan, then West Pakistan, even though two persons or two gentlemen from the same genre went on to become Prime Ministers of India, Mr. I.K. Gujral, Dr. Manmohan Singh. I sometimes shudder to think if they had gone and settled down in Jammu Kashmir, they would have been deprived of the destined privilege of becoming Prime Ministers. So such a huge anomaly happening. So we can go on and on, but for the paucity of time, I think I would conclude by saying that when we talk about the next 25 years, the Amrit Kal, when India would reach the pedestal, where is that value addition going to come to the economy, as was being stated by the earlier speaker? It has these resources, the unexplored resources, the lesser resources, the Himalayan resources, the Roma resources, the ocean, which had not been ever given the kind of attention that they deserve. And I'm sure if we are able to do that, and sometimes I think this is the best time happening for the youth of this country, 70%. The other day I was asked in a podcast, any regret and any wish? I said I can't regret because God will be angry. But yes, wish is, I wish I was a youth here, because we didn't have the kind of milieu in my generation. We had the aspiration, and ultimately we ended up becoming prisoners of our own aspiration. Here you have the aspiration, and outlets are much, much multiple. And therefore, I'm sure those who are the youth today will have the privilege to celebrate Century India in 2047 and celebrate New India. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jitendra Singh, for that wonderful address. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my proud privilege and honor to introduce to you Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral R. Hari Kumar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, ADC. Admiral R. Hari Kumar has commanded Coast Guard ships C-01, INS Nishank, INS Kora, INS Ranveer, and INS Virat. His other seagoing appointments include Fleet Operations Officer and Fleet Gunnery Officer of Western Fleet, EXO of INS Vipul, GO of INS Ranjit, Commissioning GO of INS Kothar, and Commissioning GO 8 of INS Ranveer. His shore appointments include Command Gunnery Officer at Headquarters Western Naval Command, Naval Advisor to Government of Seychelles, Training Commander INS Dronacharya.